she never married. Yet 20 years later, she discovered that her former lover's daughter had the exact same name as her.
But Jane.
That one call instantly shattered every bit of composure she had been holding together. What kind of unforgettable love could make a man, even after marrying another woman, choose her name for his daughter, letting an unfinished regret live on in another life? The whole story begins with this woman's legendary yet heartbreaking life. She is the woman now printed on British banknotes, and she is regarded as a national treasure of Britain, but she spent her whole life in poverty, although the world sees her as a godmother of romance. In real life, one unforgettable love left her unmarried and alone until the end. Although she did not become someone's wife, she became Jane Austen.
For I will not marry without affection, like my mother. And now I have to dig my own damn potatoes!
She merely rejected a rich man's proposal, and her mother completely broke down. In the battle between security and love, Jane Austen stubbornly chose love, but her mother warned her from bitter experience that love was only seasoning, while money was the foundation of survival. Jane thought her father would understand and support her, but instead, he told her nothing could destroy a person's spirit more completely than poverty. Although she didn't agree with her father's point of view, she couldn't refute it. After all, in Britain at that time, women had little right to pursue knowledge or go out and earn money, so marriage was not about feelings, it was a transaction for survival. Although Jane Austen's father was a respected pastor, his income was meager. Her mother, who loved her husband deeply, still had to dig potatoes just to help keep the family afloat. Her mother did not want her daughter to repeat her own life, so she took Jane to visit the powerful local Mrs. Gresham. Unexpectedly, the lady's nephew, Wesley, fell for Jane at first sight. When he heard Jane say she liked dancing, he promised to hold a grand ball for her, even though he was terrible at dancing himself. But to Jane, Wesley was dull, awkward, and utterly lacking in charm. Facing her mother's vision of a marriage where food and clothing would never be a worry, Jane remained stubborn and cold. She did not want to sell her soul just to survive. She stubbornly waited for the man who could truly make her heart race. The fateful moment finally arrived on this day. To celebrate her sister Cassandra's engagement, Jane was passionately reading her own writing aloud. Just as the whole family was immersed in it, the door was suddenly pushed open. A late and uninvited guest barged into her world just like that. The man was handsome and sharply dressed, but his face carried a trace of weariness and disdain. After listening to Jane read, he even mocked her to the people beside him, saying her writing was self-indulgent and full of melodrama. This straightforward humiliation instantly ignited Jane's anger. In anger, she tore the manuscript she had worked so hard on into pieces. She never expected her talent to be worth nothing in the eyes of this arrogant Londoner. What Jane did not know was that although Tom was a brilliant law student from London, every expense of his was paid by his judge uncle. His uncle valued his talent and hoped he would become an excellent lawyer, then eventually inherit the family estate. But Tom spent his days obsessed with boxing, hanging around pleasure houses, and burning through money. To discipline him, his uncle angrily exiled him to this remote corner of the countryside. For Tom, who was used to the bright lights and wild nights of London, the muddy roads and dull social life here felt suffocating. Until one day, he met Jane in the woods. He knew that Jane was resentful of him and tried to use humor to resolve the embarrassment. However, Jane remained as cold as ice, because in her mind, Tom had already been marked as arrogant. Yet it was precisely this sharp back and forth that left a deep mark on both of them. Later, at the ball Wesley held for Jane, the two met again. Seeing Wesley dance clumsily and keep stepping on Jane's feet, Tom made no attempt to hide his smirk. Jane was embarrassed and furious, complaining to her family and friends about Tom's rudeness, only for Tom to quietly appear right behind her.
Where exactly in Ireland does he come from, anyway?
Limerick, Miss Austen.
At the most awkward possible moment, Tom invited her to dance. Feeling caught out, Jane could only accept and step onto the dance floor. As they spun, advanced, and retreated, the two traded words and tested each other. For the first time, Jane understood what it felt like to meet her match. After that, something between them quietly shifted. They raced through the woods and competed on the cricket field. When Jane finally beat Tom and cheered on the field, Tom was captivated by her vivid, fearless energy. But what truly pushed their relationship forward was a chance encounter in the library. Tom set aside his usual reckless manner and discussed literature with Jane. Unlike everyone else, he did not blindly praise Jane's writing. Instead, he bluntly pointed out its limits. He believed Jane's writing was beautiful, but lacked the spark of real life. If she wanted to write love that truly moved people, she had to experience it herself. Before leaving, he handed Jane a scandalous book called Tom Jones. The book was full of bold emotional descriptions, and Jane was deeply shaken by the wild world inside it, a world she had never known. From that day on, their relationship began to heat up. They began meeting often, talking about literature, human nature, and subjects polite society would never allow. Jane discovered that Tom was not just an empty-headed playboy. He had his own independent understanding of literature, but what truly made Jane fall for him was a boxing match. When he saw someone being viciously beaten during a match, Tom took off his coat without hesitation and stepped in. In the end, he was beaten badly, bruised and battered, looking utterly miserable, but his sincerity and sense of justice in standing up for a stranger struck Jane right in the heart. However, reality is always cruel. Mrs. Gresham begins to pressure Jane. She flaunted her family fortune with extreme arrogance, forcing Jane to compromise and accept her nephew Weasley's proposal. Jane also knew this was the only chance to lift her family out of poverty. Love or security? That eternal dilemma now stood before Jane. Just as Jane was struggling in pain, news came that Tom was about to leave and return to London. At that moment, Jane panicked, so she anxiously searched for him at the ball. Just when she thought everything was over, Tom appeared before her with a smile. In fact, Tom knew about Weasley's proposal to Jane, but he was penniless, so how could he possibly compete with the wealthy Weasley? What Tom didn't expect was that Jane firmly chose him.
I have no money, no property. I am entirely dependent upon that bizarre old lunatic, my uncle. I cannot yet offer marriage, but you must know what I feel.
That night, Tom made a reckless decision. He wanted to take Jane to London and convince his uncle. Naively, he believed that once his uncle met Jane, he would be impressed by her talent and agree to the marriage. At first, the trip to London seemed full of promise. Jane visited under the false identity of the Countess's cousin, out of respect for the Countess, and with Tom protecting her throughout the meal. The judge uncle showed only approval toward Jane. This gave them hope for a happy future. Tom also took Jane to visit Mrs. Fewelide, a famous female writer of the time. Jane admired how she could be both a good wife and a well-known writer, but the writer said her achievements and fame had not brought honor to her husband. Instead, they had become a source of mockery and humiliation for him in society. Because in society's eyes, a good wife only needed to quietly manage the household and support her husband. Although Jane knew a writer's path would be difficult, her determination to marry Tom did not waver. But just as Tom was about to discuss marrying Jane with his uncle, an anonymous letter was delivered to him. The letter revealed Jane's true identity. She was just a poor country parson's daughter. The so-called Countess's cousin was merely a cover for someone trying to climb into the upper class. The uncle was furious. He decided Jane was a gold-digging girl trying to marry above her station. He threatened Tom, saying that if he dared marry this woman, he would cut off every source of financial support. Jane stood outside the door and heard everything, yet she still held on to hope, wishing Tom would choose to face the hardship with her. But Tom hesitated.
But I must. I have a duty.
That single moment of hesitation sent Jane's heart crashing to the bottom. At the final test between security and love, she had made a desperate choice and chosen love. But Tom was stopped by reality. She did not become hysterical. She simply stared into Tom's eyes. After seeing his weakness clearly, she turned and went home. But as soon as Jane returned home, she learned that her sister's fiancé had died of illness at the front. In this cold winter, the two sisters lost their loved ones at the same time. Jane threw herself desperately into housework, numbing herself and trying to become a machine with no thoughts. Then one day, her brother told her that Tom was about to become engaged to a wealthy young woman. She never expected him to find someone new so soon after they parted. After the worst pain passed, a kind of rebirth followed. Jane picked up her pen again and turned all her pain, anger, and unwillingness into words. The novel Pride and Prejudice, which would later stun the world, began to take shape under her pen. Just when Jane was about to bow to fate and consider accepting Weasley, Tom suddenly appeared. His eyes were full of regret and pain, but Jane said she wished him well in finding the other half of his life. At this time, Tom could no longer suppress his emotions. Although Jane loved him, she also knew there was an insurmountable gap between them. But Tom proposed that they elope. This time, the fire in Jane's heart was lit again. She no longer wanted to think about money or gossip. She only wanted to embrace her love. So, she left a letter to her sister and left with Tom. The two raced along the country road, already imagining a happy life ahead. But halfway through, the carriage became stuck in the mud, as if hinting that their future was far from clear. Jane accidentally noticed a letter slipping from Tom's pocket. That was a letter home from his mother. The letter thanked Tom for sending money home, money that had saved his sick father and supported his many younger siblings. Only then did Jane realize that he was not a wasteful dandy, but the eldest son carrying the fate of an entire family. If they elope, his uncle will cut off Tom's financial resources. The relatives who depended on him would also be pushed into desperation, and as his wife, she would be just as penniless. Jane completely woke from the frenzy of elopement. She finally understood that true love is not possession, but letting the other person live. She decided to leave, but Tom still wanted her to stay.
Do you love me?
Jane understood that if their love was built on destroying Tom's future and family, the heavy guilt in his heart would eventually turn into resentment toward her. Rather than blame each other later, it was better to part with dignity now. That way, they could preserve the best version of each other in memory. After Jane returned home, she stood alone in the open wilderness. She knew she had said goodbye to the only true love of her life, and that her heart would likely never be moved that way again. After returning home, however, she received a proposal from her father's student, John. Although Jane rejected the proposal, she suddenly thought of the anonymous letter that had ruined her and Tom. John admitted that he had written that letter out of jealousy. Even after learning the truth, Jane could no longer bring herself to complain, because nothing matters anymore. She had wrongly believed Weasley wrote the anonymous letter, so she found him, apologized for misjudging him, and firmly rejected him once more, because after experiencing such unforgettable love, she could no longer accept a marriage of compromise. Although Weasley was disappointed, he admired Jane's courage. From then on, Jane Austen never married. In her writing, every heroine receives the happy ending Jane herself never had. They not only marry for love, they also gain security. That was her comfort for a life marked by regret, and also her gentlest revenge against reality. 20 years passed in the blink of an eye. At a party, Jane, now a celebrated figure in the literary world, saw that familiar figure again. Tom had also become a famous lawyer, but there was an indescribable weariness in his eyes. He brought his daughter over to Jane and introduced the girl to her. The girl was Jane's most devoted reader, and her name was also Jane.
But
Jane.
Hearing that name made Jane Austen's heart suddenly tighten. She knew Tom had never forgotten her, because he had carved the name Jane into the continuation of his own life. This restrained confession made Jane make an exception. She agreed to the girl's request and read her work aloud in public. Tom stood in the crowd, watching her quietly. There was appreciation and regret in his eyes. There was also a deep love that had crossed half a lifetime and still had not gone out. Although there was no wedding ring on Jane Austen's finger, in the kingdom she built with words, love was always beautiful and burning. This film is less a biopic than a masterpiece of romantic regret. It does not force a happy ending on the audience. Instead, it respects the cruelty and truth of history. The most moving moment in the film is Jane's decisive turn during the elopement. When we are young, we think love is everything, and that we can burn the whole world down for it. But Jane tells us with clear-eyed reason that adult love requires more than passion, it also carries responsibility. If she had selfishly chosen to elope, the world might have gained a resentful couple worn down by daily life, but it would have lost a great female writer forever. By letting go, she saved Tom's family, and also protected her own dignity and talent. Some people use love to complete themselves. Others only become whole after giving love up. At the end of the film, the name of Tom's eldest daughter is the final stroke of genius, enough to break every viewer's heart. Although the two could never be together, Tom let his own bloodline carry Jane's name. It was as if he were reminding himself forever that Jane was the one regret of his life, the mark that could never be erased. This kind of regret feels more profound than perfection, and more tender than staying together. May everyone torn between love and reality be like Jane, with the courage to run toward the storm, and the clarity to let go before everything is lost. May they have the honesty to love fiercely, and the resolve to remain loyal to themselves.